This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on second part of the budget session of the Parliament and the issues. The participants are K.V. Prasad, political analyst, and Aditi Tandon, journalist.
The second half of the budget session for this year has resumed from today, and it will have 19 sittings until April 8. As we know, Mr. Prasad, that this is a significant session in the sense that the government is going to seek the parliamentary nod for budgetary proposals. This is also a time when the COVID graph of India is now on a downward spiral, and the daily new cases today have touched a 680-day low. So it's one of those occasions when the government will feel a little confident about a lot of things when it comes to spending. But we can't forget that there will be a huge impact of the ongoing Ukraine-Russia crisis in the upcoming days, and there's also apprehension created to some extent by the opposition, especially Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who tweeted a few days ago that fuel prices might again be on an upsurge. How do you view the upcoming session which has started today? What, according to you, will be the pressures on the government, especially on the fuel side, since the crisis in Ukraine is unfolding still?
The fact remains budget session is the most important for any political party or the government in the day, simply because it needs to get its financial bill out of the house. And the best part of it is the BJP has the numbers, which has the power of the purse. So there should be no issue on that count per se. Of course, the opposition and others will try and how best to get the maximum out of the budget proposals. And already we have seen during the intercession period, most committees have examined the demands for grant and budget discussions gets underway. Some of the ministries will be taken up. That gives you an idea as to how the government is spending money on specific projects and specific policies and programs, which the parliamentarians will be free to raise and discuss. So as such, the finance bill should not have a problem. But the fact remains that suppose the ongoing conflict in Ukraine is bound to have an impact. As it is, we have seen the international crude prices are on the high. Many parts of the world are already facing high energy costs. And India too will not be spared of this brunt is the general estimation. So I think it's but natural, but the government in this budget per se cannot make much options except because it can't factor those things and come up with some pool and suggestion as to how to deal with this. During the discussion, members could raise such an issue because they've already indicated. So I think that's where we stand. Nonetheless, the government's priority will be to get the finance bill passed by the House.
Mr. Prasad, today Lok Sabha has begun discussions on a very important budget item with respect to the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. How do you view this particular item and the fact that, election in Jammu and Kashmir is widely anticipated, although the Delimitation Commission is yet to come up with its concrete and formal proposals? But the budget itself for Jammu and Kashmir will be viewed with a lot of interest, considering what all proposals the government has made in it, especially with the fact in mind that elections will be due any time after the delimitation happens, as has been suggested by Home Minister Mr. Amit Shah on several occasions in the past.
Yes, the fact remains this is an obligation because we all know Jammu Kashmir is united, so it's administered directly by the government of India. So it's much natural that the budget has to come to the House for its passage. Probably that's why you've seen it on day one of the resumed session. The finance minister has moved the bill. Congress and other members had taken an objection to the fact that it was introduced today and I think in passage itself is being taken up. So those are technical issues with it. But the budget certainly is important because a little bit of debate that I heard for a while. There were issues members of the opposition were trying to raise, including energy crisis in the valley and across the Union Territory. So those are the issues of concern which people and the electorate are bound to figure in the discussion, and the government would come up with a response. So this is a statutory obligation for the government to present the budget. As for elections, yes, we'll have to wait for the delimitation process to get over, and only then can one expect the process of elections to kick in.
Also, it's important to see that the bill with respect to the merger of municipal corporations of the NCT of Delhi has also perhaps been lined up, although it is yet to be taken up in the Business Advisory Committee of both the houses. How do you view that, Mr. Prasad, considering that Aam Aadmi Party, which rules in Delhi, is on a massive upswing, especially after its landslide victory in Punjab
The Aam Aadmi Party was actually in Delhi, which were scheduled to be held, probably newspaper reports suggesting that the government of India wants merger for the three municipal corporations, which happened almost probably a decade ago when the Municipal Corporation of Delhi was broken into three: the South Delhi, East Delhi, and the Central Delhi, and other areas, North Delhi to be specific, because the Central Delhi or the main Delhi where is controlled by the NDMC, New Delhi Municipal Committee, which is a different kind of a setup. So I think the calculation must be done by the Aam Aadmi Party in terms of, as you suggested, they are on the victory spree. Punjab must have surely lifted the spirits to very high expectations. But now if the bill comes through, so it's going to take some time for the mergers to take place and the seats to be looked up accordingly. I think that's where it looks like the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is already holding the three municipal councils, the municipal corporations in all the three areas, would be out to defend its work. We already been seeing a running battle. The day we had the Minister Smriti Irani telling on the budgets that were not being released by the Aam Aadmi Party government. So I think we can hear more of these as we go along. But surely if the government has planned, it'll have to come to the House because of the Delhi Act itself.
If we go towards the politics of the budget session, although, legislative part is one part of it, we saw today when Prime Minister Narendra Modi walked into the Lok Sabha, he got a rousing reception with a thumping of desks by the Treasury benches. Obviously, because the BJP has 1 in 4 of the 5 states that it was ruling, and the opposition side was a little, at least looked demoralized. We only yesterday had the Congress Working Committee meeting where Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, the Congress president, was fully endorsed to lead the party yet again till the formal election of the Congress president happens. How do you look at the optics of BJP Congress situation, in the sense that Congress is really in a corner right now, having lost 4 states where it did hope to do well?
I don't see much happening in terms of the politics of budget session, because if you really go back to when the session began itself on 31st of January and the houses started meeting, we've seen very smooth functioning of both houses of parliament. That was an indication itself, and that was much before we had assembly elections and the results as they came up. So the tactics and strategy of opposition seem to be to engage the government on the floor of the House, pick up issues on the floor of the House, and keep making its political stand by taking part in debates and discussions and asking questions. So which is a very legitimate way in which things can be taken when the whole system of parliamentary democracy is the government is held accountable through parliament. And members of parliament, being representatives of people, do it. So I think that's a perfect copybook style that's happening. Of course, these results, as you pointed out, have been stupendous for the Bharatiya Janata Party. So the mood will be upbeat. And the opposition, as many reports indicated, and probably also you have reported it, the fact is the Congress would feel a little more diffident, in the sense other political parties who are sharing the opposition space may or not really be seen too much in the company of Congress, because the collective opposition, as one saw, in trying to raise issues in a uniform manner, if not in unison, to try and corner the government on issues of concern. So I think different political parties which are occupying the opposition benches may like to reprioritize according to their own requirements or their own priorities. So that we might see, that will be an interesting area to watch as we go along. But yet, of course, issues of concern will definitely figure. And I think the opposition, there is a meeting of minds, and if people sit down and see if they can come up with a common strategy, I don't think, we haven't read anything so far on that.
Right. I think you've really articulated it very well, the challenges for the opposition. Coming back to the parliament session, we will also see a very important Rajya Sabha election cycle, Mr. Prasad, in the midst of the ongoing second half of the budget session on March 31, when elections will be held to 9 Rajya Sabha seats, and majority of them from Punjab. What is your thought on this upcoming election cycle in Rajya Sabha and the overall, dynamics of Rajya Sabha's numbers?
Well, I think the numbers do right now, as we see over the last few years, we have seen that the opposition, in particular the Congress, has been losing a lot of its members, and 13 seats, I think, elections have to be held on 31st of March, and by 2nd and 9th of April, a set of seats will get vacant, including 5 from Punjab. It's almost given, it's no-brainer to say that the Aam Aadmi Party's strength will go up from Punjab because it has 92 seats. Mind you, in Punjab, the elections will be in 2 separate notifications, which means the number of seats divided by the number of MLAs, the weightage accordingly. So clearly, the Aam Aadmi Party should be setting to bag all 5. So that will dramatically increase because you already have 3 Aam Aadmi Party from, I think, 2 from Delhi. So the numbers will go up. that dynamic changes. Aam Aadmi Party, as you pointed out, will have its own understanding because now it is gearing up for its own political expansion in terms of its presence in many other states. So it will have its own strategy and tactics. Opposition, UP and other areas, already we have seen number of reports suggesting that which party will tend to gain. I think that is the fine balance. As of now, what we see, the ruling coalition has the working majority, if one to say so, because on key bills and issues, it tends to get support from many other sections of the House. We've seen that. But we'll have to see because many cases, the positions are taken by party on issues. They say issue-based support. So we'll have to see because a few months ago, if I were to say, for instance, Telangana Rashtra Samiti, which was at one point of time supporting the Bharatiya Janata Party and its proposals in the House, started to making a different stance. So we'll have to wait and watch on how specific issues, specific bills, if the government requires support, how will that pan out?
Right, and this will also have a bearing later on the very important election of the President of India, which is scheduled in the mid of the year, wouldn't it?
Yes, of course. But you see, we must remember, as everybody has written much before the UP elections, the weightage is very high from a state like UP. So that having turned in favor of the BJP and many other states having come to BJP, it looks now fairly comfortable for the Bharatiya Janata Party to have its nominee back elected to the Rashtrapati Bhavan.
Mr. Prasad, on the issues that the opposition has flagged yesterday and today, there was the Business Advisory Committee meeting of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and the opposition has said that it does want proper discussion on, the safety of Indians in Ukraine. The Prime Minister has chaired the Cabinet Committee on Security meeting yesterday and emphasized that everything should be done to bring back the mortal remains of the Karnataka boy who was killed in Kharkiv during the shelling. So all those issues are on the mind of the opposition. Although Operation Ganga has been a success in retrieving a lot of Indians, how do you see this major issue considering India has relocated its embassy also finally to Poland yesterday?
Well, I think opposition would try to raise it, but by and large the perception is that the majority of Indians have been evacuated safely. They have been given guided passages to neighboring countries from where India ran dedicated flights to bring back. In fact, we also read reports to the extent that some citizens of neighboring countries were also taken on those flights and brought back to safety. In fact, today as we speak, if you remember in the morning, there was a question by Congress Gaurav Gogoi in Lok Sabha when he sought to know if the government was looking at the problem the students, particularly the final year students of medical colleges who are in Ukraine, what would be their fate? Is there a plan for their academic year is not wasted? So I think the minister, Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan, did say that the government is aware of it. Probably, so there could be specifics because many states were affected in the sense their students were stuck in Ukraine. So there was concern. We saw also Tamil Nadu, so Mr. T.R. Balu thanking the government for evacuating their students to Tamil Nadu. So that will be the factor, but I don't see much political issue. Of course, matters of concern like student and their welfare and what's happened next is bound to be taken up during the course of discussion as and when the House is prepared for itself.
Right, and also on the issue of the minimum support price, the legal guarantee, which is a pending matter with the government. We remember, Mr. Prasad, that in the last session, Agriculture Minister Mr. Narendra Tomar had said that it was the Election Commission that had suggested that since elections are going on, the promised MSP committee, which the Prime Minister had announced earlier in November at the time of announcement of repeal of farm laws, it will be taken up once the election cycle is over. So that issue also apparently will get addressed because that's also high on priority of the opposition.
The farmers had mentioned this at that point of time that they needed a written guarantee, a legal guarantee or some law to that effect. And as you pointed out, the minister, Mr. Tomar, had told the House before the Houses took break. So I think it's bound to be taken up because if suppose the agriculture discussion takes place on the Ministry of Agriculture or some others, the opposition can raise this issue. Even otherwise, they can raise this issue through other means and available tools in Parliament. This is bound to be taken up, more so because this saw an agitation for more than a year. So this remains an outstanding promise. That's what the farmers tell us. So I think we'll have to see. And I think the government has already told the House. So it's a matter of time, I believe.
Absolutely. So as you suggested, Mr. Prasad, this looks set to be a productive second half of the budget session with the government already winning 4 out of 5 states and upbeat. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on second part of the budget session of the Parliament and the issues. The participants were KV Prasad, political analyst, and Aditi Tandon, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio.